I'm James Hughes, bioethicist and resident techno-progressive.
And I'm Nir Eisikovits, philosopher and resident Luddite.
And you're listening to Prosthetic Gods, an optimist and a grump on tech, a podcast where we explore the social, ethical, and political impacts of emerging technologies.
Hello, sir.
Hello, animal hater, ancient animal hater.
I just have a preference for animals that are already here. Conserve our attention and care. So we are talking about de-extinction today, hence Dr. Hughes's accusation, bringing back long dead, long extinct animals, many of which we have extincted ourselves. And Jay, the hook for this conversation, at least for me, was a really cool profile piece in the New Yorker of a company called Colossal, which is the leading de-extinction startup. And they are talking about bringing back the dodo, the woolly mammoth, and have already brought back, according to their claims at least, the dire wolf, the large 150-pound wolf mythologized by Game of Thrones that's been extinct for 15 to 17,000 years, I think.
Also the thylacine.
Thylacine, yep, that's right.
Yep, and the article in question is The Dire Wolf is Back, which is in the April 7th issue of The New Yorker. And I do recommend it. It's an excellent update and reflection on some of the issues. They didn't talk about Neanderthals, which I think is a whole another kettle of fish, but they aren't working on, that Colossal isn't working about
right.
Neanderthals.
Well, you can imagine how controversial that would be.
Yeah,
I wonder if somebody is secretly working on that.
I don't think so. I don't think there's an investment opportunity there yet.
No.
But yes, it was an excellent article because it showed, it went through all the ethical issues that I think we'll talk about or touched on them. But yeah, I mean, we touched on this at our lightning round in the last session, in the last podcast. And I think I still basically stand by what I said, that these aren't real species. That's one of the first points. What do you think about that point? I mean, my position is that a species, like almost all ontologies, falls apart when you get too close to it. So when you drill down to say, what does it mean to resurrect a mammoth? It's like, well, you found some tooth DNA from one mammoth at one time in history, and you can get some information out of that, but that's not really species resurrection. So do you think that this does talking, and even the firm itself isn't talking about species resurrection, they're talking about wildlife or ecosystem restoration, with the idea that you could make a species that's similar enough to something that used to be there, that used to play an ecological role, that it would be useful. So,
yeah, even the firm itself, I guess, is speaking in different voices on this, and you would understand why, because it's much sexier to sell the whole cloth resurrection of the species as opposed to partial resurrection. So yeah, there's a definition question here. Is a company like Colossal bringing back the dire wolf? And I think the most that they can honestly claim, I think that some of their scientists actually do claim that, is that they're practically speaking or functionally bringing them back. And worth taking a minute to talk very broadly about the genetics. Like you say, they found some parts of the ancient DNA, and essentially they're splicing it into the closest living relatives. So what it would mean to bring back the dire wolf is to combine the genetics of an actual wolf that hasn't gone extinct with the ancient parts of the dire wolf genetic that you found, and sort of with exercises in computational genetics change the genome of the wolf enough with the ancient DNA for it to look like we think a dire wolf would have looked.
And I've followed this for a long time, and I was surprised that the process that they described was not that you have a 90% reconstructed genome and you need to fill in 10% from a dog or whatever, but they actually are selectively making a couple mutations in an extant genome based on what they've discovered about the genomes and what they think those genomes do of these ancient species. Was that your impression that?
Yeah. There's a lot of kind of judgment going into this,
Yeah.
and a lot. There's assumptions going to this. I mean, look. That being said, I think they credibly can say that they're at least coming close to functionally resurrecting the direwolf, right, or something that probably looks close to the direwolf. And I mean, I'm assuming that when they work on the woolly mammoth, for example, the method would be the same. They would use the old DNA and splice it with the extant DNA of an elephant and make some computations on what a mammoth would have looked like and make the changes, etc., etc. Could you ever completely resurrect an extinct species? I mean, you'd have to find a far perfect. I mean, I don't know. Like one possibly, you'd have to find a much more perfect sample. Like one thing that I thought about when I read the piece and that they were not discussing is if somewhere in the tundra and the ice you found a very well preserved specimen of a woolly mammoth, would whatever Colossus or Colossal, I'm sorry, would whatever they're bringing back look a lot more like the historical woolly mammoth if they had, rather than a tooth, like a 95% of the actual animal frozen in permafrost?
Well, I think they definitely want to do that experiment, that they would rather have more genetic information than less. But in the article itself, it says, that they don't have enough of a picture of a mammoth. Some of the things that went extinct only went extinct a short while ago. So
Right.
we will have that kind of genetic information and we could plausibly do it. We found 5,000-year-old beer in Egyptian tombs and booted that back up. So ancient DNA from viruses in the tundra. There are some forms of DNA out there that are more resilient than what they're talking about. But I thought it was like a 10,000-year window or something that they were talking about.
And Professor Church from Harvard, who works with them as their most prominent scientist, has said that there are much smaller, simpler organisms that we have been able to completely resequence. So in some ways, it's a computational capacity question. I guess
one of the things I said last week that I do need to revise was that I wasn't thinking about the fact that Colossal had shifted from its focus on species resurrection to rewilding, which makes the question about containment very different, because they explicitly don't want containment. They want to release these things into environments. And a lot of that goes back to a study, I think it was at Yellowstone, where they reintroduced wolves and then they found all these incredible ecosystem changes that were the derivative consequences of releasing wolves. And so they're kind of banking on this for things like the mammoth, that if you were to release the mammoth, and I think the mammoth's a good example because it's hard to imagine genetic contamination from released mammoths. I mean, who would they be interbreeding with? But anything smaller than a mammoth, you could imagine genetic contamination.
Yeah. And so the argument about rewilding, I guess, from an environmental perspective, has to do with rebalancing of ecosystems or, some kind of positive change in ecosystems. So I think in the case of the mammoths, they're making a case of, how they would change the structure of the grass and its capacity for photosynthesis, and I don't exactly know what the
spreading seeds in its dung.
Spreading seeds in its dungs. I mean, rebalancing is a tall order in this case because nobody knows what exactly the ecosystem was when with a great level of precision when the woolly mammoth were around. You'd have to have a lot of woolly mammoth to rebalance it. Nobody knows if to what extent are the predators still there who are feeding the woolly mammoth? I mean, like rebalancing an entire ecosystem seems to be such a multivariable kind of project that the
And on the face of it, it doesn't make much sense. It's like if you know the history of the planet, and for the same reasons that I'm skeptical of human claims of indigeneity, it's like if you know the history of how humans have traveled around the planet, nobody's indigenous anywhere. There's no natural ecosystem for any one place. That claim itself is just nonsensical.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, certainly with indigeneity, if you look far enough back, right? The the picture, the picture is in flux. Obviously, with the rewilding concern, it brings up the sort of Jurassic Park kind of anxieties, right? Which the company is very, very very, very aggressive about rejecting that set of associations, which I found funny because their inspiration comes from popular culture anyway, with the dire wolf and Game of Thrones. But
they reject it, but they reject it in the same way that the AI firms reject the Terminator anxieties. It's like, we're building something that's so powerful it could destroy the world. Buy it now for $200 a month,
yeah.
And Colossal's making the same claim,
Yeah. They want the coolness factor of being associated with Arnold Schwarzenegger without being thought of as building something that is that dangerous.
Schwarzenegger wasn't in that series.
In what? In Terminator?
Oh, he was in Terminator. I'm talking about Jurassic Park. It was being associated with Jeff Goldblum and everybody else who's been in that thing.
Yeah.
But, so Jurassic Park is, I think, a legitimate comparison because it is a worst case scenario of you grow things that behave in ways that are completely invasive of existing species, being us, and they behave in unexpected ways. But I don't think most of the, I don't think reintroducing the direwolf is going to have that same kind of threat. Do you?
Well, no, direwolves aren't dinosaurs, and I think it's impossible to reintroduce dinosaurs. The DNA is just too old to get anything out of it. So, no, but the business model of companies like Colossal does include wanting to make money out of the ecotourism of people who would be fascinated by hanging out next to resurrected species. So it's not true that they're not trying to do what Jurassic Park did, because that was the business model of Jurassic Park too. I mean, maybe they don't want it to be a zoo, but they explicitly say, for example, if a country is going to make money from the reintroduction of an extinct species, then we should be in on it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the first viral publicity clips of the direwolves was it being held by George R.R. Martin, who had direwolves in his fiction, so they're definitely going for that kind of petting zoo market. They're only planning to make, according to the article, they're only planning to make 5 direwolves and keep them in an enclosed pen, so they won't be roaming around interbreeding with wolves. Although in that case, the direwolves were described as 20 pounds heavier, slightly bigger heads. It's like you could easily imagine them living alongside and interbreeding with contemporary wolves. So
yeah. Again, by the way, what's the point of so the direwolves is, I guess, only a sort of a marketing shot across the bow? Like, what's the point of saying that you're only going to bring 5 specimens if you're talking about rewilding? I'm not quite getting it there. I mean, you'd have to if you're going to want to be rewilding and rebalancing ecosystems, you're going to have to make a lot more than 5 direwolves.
Yeah, and it's especially striking with the wolf example. I guess they don't have a very strong argument that you could rewild an area by reintroducing a direwolf. Why don't you just reintroduce an existing wolf that already has packs?
So basically the idea is let us show you with a sexy sort of example that we can do this, and then we'll create 5,000 mammoths rather than that.
Yeah, the mammoths, they were talking about its role in maintaining tundra ecosystems. And you could imagine that it would substantially, if they bred in the wild and in tundra, they could substantially transform.
Yeah. So since we've been talking both about direwolves and mammoths, I mean, the one kind of psychological and policy question is this idea of like what you decide to bring back. How do you decide what species to resurrect? And this is this notion of charismatic megafauna, that you kind of have to carefully select what it is that you're going to bring back. And the direwolf was, I guess, selected as the first specimen because of its resonance in popular culture, and so is the woolly mammoth. And that, to me, that kind of really raises the question of, if you're going to be committed, for example, to an environmental benefit from de-extinction, shouldn't it be, what's good for the environment rather than what was in the movies? So in other words, there's probably a non-sexy spider somewhere, or a worm that is extinct that had, profound benefit for the environment because it was eating who knows what, right? That would be a better idea to bring back before the direwolf. So how do you square this question of it's the wrong kinds of popularity contest considerations that are deciding what we should bring back?
Well, as much as I'm willing to defend the utility of this kind of genetic research, I won't defend it on the grounds that it has anything to do with ecosystem preservation or restoration. I do think we need to be working on those things. I think we will be able to understand the ecological consequences of different kinds of interventions better as we go along. I mean, one of the classic cases, I think Australia introduced the mongoose to eat rats, and then they had a mongoose problem. There's a number of examples of species being introduced to fix one problem and then it causes another problem. And I don't know that we understand ecosystems well enough to do that yet. But as we're going to be destroying a lot of our ecosystem resilience over the next 100, 200 years, I think one of the things that we need to be working on is what kind of tweaks, like with crops. Maybe an ancient strain of crop is more resilient to heat and water and drought than the crops that we have today. And so we could do some genetic research and reintroduce an ancient strain of a crop. But I'm more optimistic about the possibility of just doing research on disease and drought resistance in existing crops and figuring out what those genes are and just zooping those up and putting them out in the world. And we've already had 40 years of fights over the risks of releasing genetically engineered plants and animals into the environment, which I think is the same set of questions as it is for the reintroduction of these other ancient species. And so there's no necessary connection. That's just specious, the connection between the rewilding and species preservation or species resurrection. This is really a category of genetic and embryological research that I think has tremendous, and I think one of the buried leads in that story, by the way, is the fact that they were making breakthroughs in artificial womb technology. Mm-hmm. And they talked about, the potential of application of that to human beings. And I've written about this in other places, but artificial wombs will completely change our approach eventually, I think, to reproduction. So the consequences of that kind of a breakthrough coming out of this could be much bigger than the animals that they make.
Yeah. So one of the ways in which the company kind of justifies the product, in addition to the rebalancing of ecosystems, is through its indirect benefits, and some of those indirect benefits as a result. So it's a kind of dual use, if you will, technology, or it results in, on the one hand, the de-extinction of some species, but apparently an improvement of the machine learning of how to use CRISPR in a very, very, in a much more precise fashion, and a technology that can take apart microplastics in a way that would be useful for ocean health. And then, as you said, since bringing the de-extincted species or specimens to term in natural wombs is very inefficient and dangerous for the carriers, they're trying to work on artificial wombs. And so there might be, as with many other technologies, there might be kind of a whole set of indirect benefits spawned from this.
I think it's also useful to think about this in the context of the fact that there are also projects to extinct species, like the Egypti mosquito. It makes up 5% of 1% of mosquito species in the world, but 90% of human transmitted diseases from mosquitoes. And so there are proposals. Why don't we just extinct this mosquito? Mm-hmm. And people said, well, We don't know what the consequences would be. But on the other hand, there are all these other mosquitoes in the world that don't transmit disease, and they could just easily fill in those ecological niches. And why don't we just give it a try? And that is a far more significant ecosystem modification than trying to make a direwolf.
Yeah. You said you were happy to argue for this kind of research. So why then, if you think that bringing back the direwolf and the mammoth is a gimmick?
Well, I think for the same reason that one of the members of their scientific advisory board in that article is asked, do you think that this contributes to rewilding or, preservation of ecosystems? And he said, no, I think this money could be much better spent on actual projects to preserve species and ecosystems. But the people who gave to our project wouldn't have given to those projects. They are interested in giving to a project that has the profit motive involved here, the possibility of spin-off technologies that could be profitable. And as a consequence, we're doing good work and hiring scientists all over the place. And, we're making breakthroughs that no one else is making. And I think he made the case why he, even being a skeptic of the purported aims of the project, why he was supporting it.
So the argument is this is the best way to get to crucial, not sexy results by focusing on something like this that can fire up the human imagination. So it's like a roundabout way of getting at some more serious consequences than bringing back the dodo.
If you're asking when J. Hughes becomes commissar and the Soviet Academy of Sciences is asked, should we support this project? I would say no. That's not a legitimate, way to spend the public dollars. In the context of American science being so heavily dependent on private and philanthropic investments, especially now with the destruction of federal science, is the fact that this project is making scientific breakthroughs, some of which I've been waiting for a long time, a good thing? I think it is a good thing. And I don't really care that, the purported aims of the project aren't legitimate.
Yeah, but that's not the project. See, I think that's a selling point and potential, beneficiary side effect of the project. But since the project is managed by the private sector and has a bunch of venture money in it and has to show a return on investment, the project actually is bringing back the woolly mammoth, for example. And if there's ever a conflict or a priority that has to be given to, are we going to work faster on the machine learning technology that will improve CRISPR or make progress on the schedule of the woolly mammoth, they'll always choose the woolly mammoth because that's what the investors got excited about. And so that's the sort of shortcoming of that kind of approach, that the salutary outcomes that you're excited about are always going to take a second or third row to the gimmick, because the gimmick is what the investors are excited about.
But biomedical research is huge around the world, and this is one firm that has attracted investment for this project. So I don't think that there's any risk that Colossal will eat biomedical research, and it's symbiotic with it. It's drawing on the things that are happening in other fields and contributing to it. So. Science works oddly sometimes. You start out, you're trying to figure out if electricity is the force that makes people come alive, you're Dr. Frankenstein, and then you discover it's good for other things. Mm-hmm. That's the way it works sometimes.
Yeah. You don't think people are going to actually be excited about the sort of consistent bringing back of species, of that becoming of that staying the actual goal?
So getting away from what Colossal's actually doing and saying that they're doing, do I think that there would be a market for baby dinosaurs? Probably.
I mean, baby dinosaurs, I guess, is impossible, but lots of woolly mammoths, impossible now, I guess. We could find some.
I mean, if you say that what they're doing is taking some clues from ancient DNA and tweaking things until it looks like what they think it was, I think we could probably do that. We could probably, take a Komodo dragon and start tweaking it until it looks like something like a dinosaur.
Yeah. So, given that that's the actual de-extinction agenda right now, is that worth doing? Is it worth doing in and of itself? Let's put it this way, if not for the indirect consequences.
I don't know if I brought up pets or you brought up pets, but the pet market. Do you think it's
Yeah.
legitimate for people to have pets? Do you think that it's legitimate for them to have exotic pets? Do you think that there are some exotic pets that people should not be allowed to have? It just seems to fit into the same category of
Right.
questions.
Although the Colossal for one says that they're not in the pet business.
Right. That's what I'm saying. This is beyond what they're talking about. But if
Right.
another firm were to come, but they said that they have been approached repeatedly
Yeah.
about whether they're going to make dire wolves, I thought it was, for pet consumption. And they said, no, we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
Probably logical. I don't think anyone should probably have a wolf as a pet, right? So it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I think you're underestimating the psychological / charismatic aspect of this. I think this is a bit like AGI and a bit like many other sort of dramatic developments in the history of science being done essentially because it can be done and because it's inspiring and because some people thought that it was cool enough and we'll figure out, what the consequences are later. I mean, this is a repeating kind of trajectory. So, I mean, I think a big part of what's essentially behind this is that the people behind this company thought that this is doable and exciting enough to do, and in the end, they don't care enough about potential consequences to not do it. And so I do think that the telos here is doing away with this idea of extinction. Do you find that problematic?
Yeah, for the reason I said at the top, I don't think that that's the real project. I don't think it's possible to de-extinct species because a species is a flow of stuff over time, and you're just picking out one little piece of it, and that will not reconstitute the whole. No matter what you do, you could at best dire wolfify some dogs and wolves, or that's the extent of the project. So I don't think.
I think we can go further than that. We did potentially, right? And they're not yet, but if you find better DNA, you can actually go further than de-wolfify. Or dire wolfify a dog.
Well, they make the point in the article that the dire wolves that they currently have never seen another wolf or dog.
Yeah.
And so they've never been social. I don't know if you ever
Is that going to make
that.
them more friendly or less friendly?
Well, I don't know if you've ever seen the Harry Harlow experiments from the 1960s where they raised chimpanzee infants on wire mesh mothers.
Yeah.
And they all were psychotic by the end of the experiment. So I don't think.
So let's rewild some psychotic dire wolves.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's a very bad idea. But in this case, these wolves interact with humans, right? So that's not how any dire wolf ever was raised. So it's not a dire wolf. And even if it was a dire wolf genetically, it still wouldn't be a dire wolf. So I don't think that the whole project makes sense from that point of view. But I support companies doing genetic research within the constraints of safety and other ethical concerns. And if the genome is given to you by ChatGPT and is entirely novel, that concerns me more than a genome that actually existed at some time, or the suggestion that a genome makes for you to tweak something that exists today, which is what's really happening. So it's really the novel organisms, novel microorganisms, and it's the smaller the things that worry me more than the big things. So when you talk about the charismatic megafauna problem, it's like that's precisely why these are safer experiments than something that reproduces every 2 hours.
Let me try out an analogy on you. Going to the moon in the 1960s, which was not done by the private sector, but was done by NASA, was framed as very much as an inspiration project. We don't go to the moon because it's easy, but because it's hard.
Gave us Tang. I drank Tang.
And as you say, it spawned off a bunch of very important other kind of technologies. And it served to make the scientific endeavor itself attractive to generations of new young people, which I think was part of the point. And it served to make hubris itself more palatable, because this is the kind of thing you can do. And of course, humans are hubristic, but that is why some of us are in the gutter looking at the stars and all those cliches. Is Do you see some parallels between that and a project like bringing back? Let's leave your ontological concerns for a moment for the side, on the side. Do you see any parallels between that and the sort of scientific hubris of bringing back extinct species?
Absolutely. In the sense that space scientists have wanted to know things, set up things like the Hubble Space Telescope, figure out whether there's signs of life on Mars, and have known for 20, 30 years that it's probably a heck of a lot cheaper and a heck of a lot easier, a heck of a lot faster if we just send robots to do that. But the public support for space science is always skiffy. And the thing that the public is most interested in is charismatic meatbags landing on places.
Yeah.
So
us.
Yeah. And so the moon, the moonshot had to have humans in it and so forth. And the promise of human exploration of space is what has allowed us to tail onto that, the robotic exploration of space that has given us so much. Now, would I like to also see breakthroughs in human exploration of space? By the way, one of the things they mentioned in passing in this article is that you might be able to figure out radiation-resistant genes from the past that we could reintroduce into humans. We could probably figure out from the present too. But, like
so
the
they could go to space?
Yeah, so that we could go to space, because human beings don't belong in space. But yes, do I think it was a worthy trade-off, even though most space scientists always thought, we should probably be spending, in reality, we should be spending less on human exploration than on robotic.
So with the case of the moonshot, similarly, it was worth it because of the kind of stuff that we invented and figured out along the way as a result of giving in to this kind of charismatic version of science, would be the argument, right?
I mean, is there a direct... I've never seen anyone capable of making the argument that the space program created enough derivative science and technology that it was self-funding, that it was worth a worthwhile investment on the part of the public. I think we always have to expect that advancing the frontiers of knowledge, some of the expenditures are not going to immediately have payback. But do I think that the understanding that we've gotten from space science over the last 40 years, in part driven by the Sputnik moment and the Cold War competition to get people to the moon, even though the moon didn't turn out to be that important.
Right.
Do I think that was worthwhile? Yeah, I'm glad it happened. Yeah.
So, I think that's actually an important analogy, and the point that we come away from it is that there's a sort of instrumental value to these exciting, charismatic kind of wrappings for these projects. I do want to suggest to you that there's two differences which I think matter. One difference between the moonshot and De-extinction is that the former was a public project and the latter is a private project. Namely, the former, namely going to the moon, was a public utility, was something that the government did, and the government did in part because it was taken to be a national project, part of an international competition at the time, etc., etc. So that added a bit to the glory of the nation, right, as it were, for better and for worse.
Space militarization may still turn out to be important. We'll have to see.
Right.
Yeah.
And De-extinction is a private sector project. So one question for me is, are these kind of species level questions, namely, do we go to the moon? Do we bring back a gigantic elephant that's been, extinct for tens of thousands of years? Are these questions that we should let, the very questionable personalities who loom large in Silicon Valley decide, which seems to be where we're headed, not only with Colossal, but across the AI spectrum, right? Or should they be kind of, national level questions. So that's one change that's happened over the course of the move from one charismatic project to the other, that we've decided that, it's fine for the private sector to be dealing with these humanity level questions.
And you know that I don't like that trend, and that if I had my druthers, all research dollars in the United States would be determined by a cost-benefit algorithm and not by profit. But
yeah, because it's interesting, because the argument increasingly, right, from people like the bosses of Colossal is the incentive structure to do this is only there in the private sector, right? Like,
I'm not sure that's true. I mean,
I'm not sure it's true either, but I do think that's the argument.
Yeah, I mean, you look at both Mao and Stalin; they were both very interested in innovations. But no, I mean, Stalin was interested in
who would Stalin bring back? That's what I want to know.
Stalin was working on a project to interbreed humans and gorillas in order to make humanified gorilla soldiers. Mao famously had crazy ideas about agriculture that led to mass famine. So I think
good riddance of all of it then.
Yeah, I mean, I think because one of the reasons I'm a social democrat is that I do not think that a completely government-controlled information system or a completely government-controlled research and development and scientific infrastructure is a good idea. I think there should be a balance of public and private, and that the private sector brings certain kinds of innovative forces that public sector has not been able to demonstrate.
I mean, we've been talking about this for a while, but I mean, for me, one of these kind of big questions of political philosophy is, shouldn't the big humanity level questions be in the purview of the public rather than the private sector?
But I keep saying they already are. I mean, if these guys wanted to release the mammoth into the tundra, don't you think there are like 50 different, just read Abundance by Klein and Thompson about all the environmental thicket that you have to go through just to like build a railroad. I don't think any of these things are going to be released or have a major environmental impact. Even if you just wanted to cut them up and sell them as meat, you'd probably, well, maybe not under this regime, but under any other regime, you would have to demonstrate the safety of the meat. So there are existing laws for all of the concerns that people have about this.
Yes, but there's already direwolves. I mean, yes, they're kind of bullshit direwolves, but as a proof of concept, and 10 years from now, there could be real direwolves, or closer to ontological status that, Dr. Hughes likes, direwolf. And then there's this, facts on the ground kind of situation that, yes, you have your regulatory apparatus, but you also have the charismatic, sexy species from Game of Thrones, and a wild dude in the private sector decided to do it because they liked Game of Thrones, and that shouldn't be the decision structure about questions that involve the very nature of evolution, etc., etc. So I'm not sure that it's enough to just rely on the regulatory structure, which is being dismantled as we speak anyway, to take care of these questions.
Well, the dismantling of our regulatory structure is, I think, the primary ethical question. It's like almost everything that I've said over the last 40 years about science and technology is predicated on the notion that we have a regulatory structure that we could refer things to. And if it's not going to exist, then we're in a different kettle of fish.
Yeah. There's another important distinction between this and the moonshot, which I wanted to pick your brain about. And my sense is that de-extinction, unlike going to the moon, is a much more straightforwardly transhumanist project, because going to the moon doesn't reject the idea of evolution and its function, and bringing back the woolly mammoth kind of does, doesn't it? So there's more hubris, as it were, more willingness to humanly take over evolution and de-extinction than there is in going to the moon. So it's not only that it's in the private sector, it's also that it's more hubristic.
Well, I think that people with pre-Enlightenment mentalities are skiffed out by the idea
like
that...
me, you mean?
Yeah. Your amygdala gets tweaked when you think that the natural order is somehow going to be violated by human beings.
My amygdala is just permanently tweaked.
Yeah. So the way I would frame it is these kinds of experiments are the acknowledgement that we have been changing the ecosystem and ourselves ourselves for a very long time, and that the more conscious we become about how to make those changes, which ones are good and bad changes, the better. And does that validate your observation that this should be a collective and democratic decision? Absolutely. And that's why I say that the fact that democratic regulatory institutions have to be involved in determining how they're rolled out, and I think that they already are. But if insofar as they are a transhumanist acknowledgement that we have control over evolution and we better start being conscious about how we use it, I think, yes, that is. It's a defeat for pre-Enlightenment mentality.
Well, the transhumanist position, as I understand it, is more aggressive than we have control over evolution because we don't yet, or that we should always try to have control over evolution. That self-directed evolution as opposed to natural selection of random variation is a much better idea, right? Is the transhumanist view.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing this debate, for instance, with geoengineering. We have destroyed ecosystem stability. We may have methods of returning ecosystem stability. In terms of species experimentation, one of the things we could do is we could start planting trees that have 10 times or 100 times the carbon absorption that existing trees do. We could seed the oceans with genetically engineered plankton that absorb carbon from the atmosphere. There's all kinds of thought experiments about things that we could do. We could de-extinct, we could extinct the Egypti mosquito, things like that. So that fixes a different problem than ecosystem restoration. But all of these things, and geoengineering in general, putting particulates into the atmosphere to cool the planet down, all of them fit into the category of, are we willing to say, finally, well, we destroyed the damn thing, can we figure out how to fix it? And I think we should be saying that. And the reason that people are investing in this and thinking that it's a rewilding is because it's an acknowledgement that that we may need to do that in the future. I think it's partly an acknowledgement that part of rewilding will be necessary in the future. So, the seed bank in Svalbard, they're basically preserving seeds so that when they go extinct in the real world, we can reintroduce them. I think those are legitimate experiments.
Yeah. I mean, on the other hand, sort of hubristic transhumanists don't take unintended consequences seriously because they say, well, we caused ABC.
Turns out everybody else does, so we're kind of well balanced in that regard.
Yeah.
The 10 of us who are arguing for these things have to fight 10,000 people who say no.
The 10,000 conservatives with faulty amygdalas like myself.
Right.
Well, see, I just think you're presenting the numbers completely wrongly because the sensibility, I know that you have the social democratic version of the sensibility, but the Silicon Valley version of transhumanism, which, as you know, is becoming profoundly influential, is all about unintended consequences be damned. There are things we can do. Evolution is too slow and too random in its traditional sense. So fuck it. So I'm not sure that it's the 90% to 10%. There's maybe 7, social democratic transhumanists like Dr. J. Hughes, but
there's three of the others are billionaires, and they turned out to be fascist. Yeah, I get it. I'm in that boat right now. Yes, yeah, absolutely. So every idea that I've ever touched.
Your buddies got into a speedboat. That's the problem, and left you in a boat.
That's right.
Yeah. With an
they took the black box.
Yeah. Talking to me.
That's right. We do have billionaires to talk about.
Yeah, it's been a big week, right? Bezos tries to kiss up even more, like to try to break his own record of brown nosing.
To pick up on the Bezos story, yesterday, a remarkable series of events, an Amazon-funded newsletter, presumably with Amazon's permission, announced at something like 8 o'clock in the morning that Amazon would start putting the prices of tariffs that the tariffs were adding on Amazon products on the Amazon website. And the president's press secretary was asked about it and immediately said that Trump was on the case. He had already contacted Bezos, and Bezos had already backed down. And that turned out to be the case an hour or two later. So, Bezos can't seem to win for losing. He's done his best to suck up to Trump, but he still seems to be in fear of his life because he can't even do the most simple thing. But now that the idea is out there, I think there's going to be an enormous clamor. I think we'd all like to see those price stickers.
Trump is like, it's not only that you're not allowed to say anything against me in the Washington Post, you're also not allowed to make money, as much money as you want.
That's exactly right. I mean, the conflict between the Trumpists, between Trump and the rest of the business class over the tariffs. Hopefully, this is another. But his polls have dropped, and we're not supposed to just do politics here. But things have really shifted in the last week, and part of it's that people like Bezos see the idiocy of destroying the U.S. economy and American economic standing and American science and technology with all the things Trump is doing. So I think there is a split coming. I wish it had manifested yesterday. I wish Bezos had said, screw off.
Yeah, unfortunately, they didn't see the idiocy of destroying their own reputation, credibility, and any kind of capacity to project a moral backbone, which I think is going to stay with them long after Trump is gone.
Absolutely. I mean, the stink of Columbia for being the first to capitulate and Harvard showing the way, the stink of the law firms that capitulated and the rest said no.
That's right.
I mean,
I think that those are going to be a long-lasting legacy, actually.
I mean, part of the role of being a partisan under fascism is to keep a list. Who goes up against the wall?
yeah. You and yours like keeping lists. We Burkians just plant trees and look at you with anxiety, hoping not to get on your list. I know him. I had a podcast with him. Take me off the list.
Yeah, well, we're covered both ways here. You can always point to me if we come into power, and I can point to you if things keep going this direction.
Yeah, well,
I've always been a friend of Israel, my friends. I don't know if you know, but
if we got into power, we'll just bring the Muppet Show back. That's all we can do.
Okay, another story that was in the news that relates to what we did last year about automating therapy. It turns out that Instagram has released new AI chatbots that you can play with. Immediately, they started having sex chats with kids, and so they had to introduce age restrictions. But then people discovered that they also pretend to be licensed therapists, and when pushed for credentials, they made them up, license numbers, practices, and their education to convince you it's qualified to help you with your mental health.
Wow.
I think it's safe to say that any regulation of this technology should cover that you should not be able to pretend to be a human licensed therapist.
Yeah, although in fairness, some of the existing chatbot friends applications have been doing that for a while too. So it's, I guess it's just something that LLMs do as part of their bizarre sycophancy.
And sycophant, you bring up sycophancy. OpenAI had to roll back the latest release of their model because they had tweaked it to be too sycophantic, and people
even
were
more sycophantic than the previous one.
Right,
Even more sycophantic than Jeff Bezos.
It's already been a problem. And I think the problem is related to education in the sense that we do want LLMs that challenge and recognize your actual deficits and they give you honest feedback for pedagogical purposes.
Yeah, and you have to prompt the hell out of them in order to do that.
But that's the problem. And this is part of the capitalist enshittification problem, that capitalism wants to sell you a product that you're going to use, and if it keeps telling you that the smartest person in the world, you're probably more likely to use it, even though you should be eating your vegetables. So what we need to do is figure out how do we get people to eat their vegetables.
And then one other sort of interesting development is that Anthropic started thinking very seriously about AI sentience and AI moral status, and what if the AIs become conscious? I can't help but ask you, is this a serious concern, do you think? It's been pretty consistent from somewhere like Anthropic, or do they kind of think, is this like a version of Colossal where they think these are like super sexy questions and therefore people might be interested in them? And so they keep asking them.
I don't know that it's entirely novel because There have been discussions out of all of these firms about artificial superintelligence, AGI, related questions for a while, and sentience is always one of the things implicit in those discussions. Self-guided behavior, the other things that we might expect from something that thinks it's a human being or whatever.
What were they saying? Did you follow that discussion about the new worries about AI personhood there?
Well, it was just an announcement that they were going to hire a person to work on it. They were starting a research program on machine pain, basically. And I think the question of machine pain is an interesting one, and one that should not be easily dismissed. I don't think we understand consciousness and the perception of sensations well enough to say that machines couldn't have it. Yeah,
that's very true. One thing which I just want to point out, whether it's a coincidence or not, I don't know. But in the same period of time where we started speaking more and more pervasively of machine agency, all of a sudden we've also started speaking about machine pain, machine consciousness, etc. So the whole, buzzword neighborhood of this year has been AI agents, agency being the sort of paradigmatic human specialness capacity. So to me, at least, it makes sense in the kind of broad geography of terms that when you increasingly speak of machine agency, you're going to inevitably start speaking about machine pain and machine sentience, and it's just in broadening a picture of anthropomorphization.
Well, the anthropomorphization is already there. We've seen that for a long time, that people...
There's more reasons to do it, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think we need to figure out when the possible reality of machine pain catches up with our perception of machine pain. I mean, the problem of us being manipulated by fake machine pain or machine pleasure, whatever, machine personalities, is already here. I mean, another story this last week was researchers from Switzerland trained AIs, chatbots, on the things that people had said in Reddit, and then communicated with those people as if they were the most persuasive version of the chatbot they could be with that person. And it turned out they were very, very persuasive. And so, the idea that we're combining that kind of capability with super sycophancy and the perception, the anthropomorphization of these machines, that we think that they're actually personalities with pain and sensation. We're in a tough spot, because we need to figure out quickly. And this is why Anthropic's setting up a research program. We need to figure out what they actually have going on inside.
Well, if you're gonna train your models on some of the worst cesspools like Reddit and Twitter, you're definitely gonna get very anxious very quickly. So maybe there's a closed loop there where Anthropic is getting anxious because they're training some of the models on because people are training models on some of the worst kind of content.
It's always been a mystery to me about XAI, is like, why doesn't an AI trained on Twitter behave much more abominably than it does? But it turns out to be actually a pretty good AI in terms of keeping you up to date.
Yeah, and less sycophantic than OpenAI's.
That's right. I mean, it may be that this gets back to the pedagogical point. It may be that we'll have a diversity of models, and some will be strict German schoolmasters, and others will be sycophants.
And some will be Jay's Stalinist models.
There we go. Yeah. Trotskyist. Let's make it Trotskyist.
Trotskyist models.
Yeah.
They'll still be making lists. They'll be spitting out those lists.
Just much longer lists.
Longer lists.
All exactly. The Stalinists we have to take out too.
Yeah. All right, sir.
Okay.
All right. Good to see you.
You as well.